All right, so I'm going to go through the Chickster rigging assignment just so you can see how to get started on that one. You'll see it's a little bit different, a little bit more forgiving than the other one is. And plus we'll learn some other stuff as well. In the modules, there's a Chickster rigging and a Chickster finish. Those are the two videos you'll watch. You'll still see the file here. I give you the Chickster video modeling file to start off with. Let me close that. And this is what we're eventually going to get to. Chickster with joints done. I think that one's it. And his eyeball didn't load, so let me just recheck this texture to see why his eyeball didn't load. There it is.
How did you do the Z's and the effects right there?
All right, so there's his eyeball. So this is what the rig will look like when you're all done. You should have a control for where the eye is looking. So that makes your job easier of moving the eye, so you're not just rotating it. If he's looking at something, you can actually put it on that item and have them look at that specific item. There's also a blink control, so we can control him blinking. There's controls for his head, so like this one here, if I rotate it, I can rotate that area. And I have this one, which will rotate his neck from this position. And then there's this one, oops, that would rotate his whole neck. Okay, now these two are obviously more fine-tuning ones of tweaking where he would be versus this one, which is the major one. So it can rotate like this, it can rotate like that. And then I may have these ones that would control exactly what he's looking at here. We'll also have a waist control. So this is more like a bipedal setup where you would have something like this. The robot mech guy doesn't have this control. He just basically has these rotators for his legs. This one, we want to be able to grab the hips and move them. And the same thing with the feet. We want to be able to grab the feet and individually move those and be able to come in here to their toes and rotate these. Now, this setup that I have on the toes is the exact same setup that we have on the mech. This setup I have here for the legs is the exact setup that I had on the mech legs, or mech arms. We also have these locators here to point where the knees are going to be facing, just like the mech. And then we also have this. So we have a couple things here. One is the tail moving. As he rotates like this, the tail moves, but it's not animating. That was something that I set up to be automatic. So if I set a keyframe here, scoochie up a bit, set a keyframe there, and I rewind and play, it's going to very slowly think about progressing. There we go. Okay, so you see how the tail feathers are actually animated automatically. So you don't have to do that kind of stuff once it's set up. Even the ones on his head can be set up like that. Currently I have it set up a different way. This is using a bend deformer so that I can manually do it. So in the video I show how to do two different ways. One is using this hair setup, and the other one is using this bend deformer, right? Cool. So let's go to the startup. Chickster. There. All right, so this is the Chickster body that you get. One change from the video is that I've given you two iterations of bodies. One of them is a rough version of the body like this. You are free to use this one if you want and then just hit 3 before you render. If you add any painted textures, like hand-painted textures onto here, it won't turn out good when you hit 3. If you go to the smoothed out version though, this one, oops, don't hit 3, doesn't have to hit 3, and so if you do a nice hand-painted texture, it'll blend nicely from surface to surface, okay? So some people want to use the smooth one, some people may want to just use the rough one. Your coloring for this can just be a flat color, it's fine, you don't have to do anything fancy. just nuts and bolts kind of stuff. So you start off in a very similar fashion as the Chickster or as the mech. We need to create joints. In this case, they don't have to be exact. Where the Chickster bends from is not going to be an exact, like this is going to be exactly where it rotates. We will have an about area. So when you go to create your joints, I didn't create any locators here. I create one for the pelvis. There it is. And then I create one for the knee. Now here with the knee, it could be here, it could be here, it could be there. Typically I try to put it a little bit closer to the front because that's typically like where your knee bends from. And then I'm going to come down here for the ankle and same kind of thing. Like it could be a little bit over this way or that way. Typically I try to get it close to the middle, but it doesn't have to be perfect. And then I'm going to switch to, I guess I'll just do this. So I'm going to draw a joint here. I'll draw a joint in the side here. I'll draw a joint there, and I'll put one there. Okay, so I'm adding a couple extra joints. And then I'll go hit the up arrow to get back here, and then start drawing these. Now these are off because he's in 3D, right? So that was actually drawing it right there. I'm switching back to this just so I can move all of these things over to the correct side. And I forgot his hip, dang it. So let's go back to our side view. Let's go back to our joint tool, and I'll go to insert joints. Oops, wrong one. Click the knee, come on, click the knee, and then drag. There we go. And if I hold D, I can just move that up. Click this one, hold D, move it into position. Good. All right, so now I have the joint there for the hip. All right, so now I can move this over to where that would be. And somehow that got moved down, so I'll just move that back into position. And then just move and rotate. And then I can duplicate this and then just scoot it over and rotate that way. Oops. Now when I get to this point, I'm just going to start redrawing these again. So back to create joints, click on that one, and then I can start making more. Like I showed before when we talked about our rigging, I can put 1,000,000 joints inside here, but it's not going to affect his model at all because there's not that many divisions. If I switch to the smooth version and I add a bunch of joints, that will help it out, but I have to more of a setup basically because I have more joints. So again, it depends on which one you're using as to how many points you want to put there. But I'm just going to put, let's say, one for every one of these rows for now. And I think I actually want to go, oops, rough on, smooth off, there we go. I want to go more towards like the back of the neck. That's really where like your neck bends from. It's not the middle of your neck, it's the back of your neck that your head rotates from. And then I'll put one, let's say here, and I'll put one there. If you're not sure, add an extra joint, and then if you don't need it, you don't need it. And then I'll add, let's say, a joint right here and a joint right there. Okay, now I go through, I would name all my stuff, make sure it's perfect. I do want to make sure all my orients are correct before I start duplicating things and flipping them over. It's not going to matter too much here because Maya will take care of all of that calculation. Same thing on the knee, Maya will take care of that. On the ankle though, I do need to make sure this is set up right. If I want to just take his ankle or his foot and rotate it like that, this does not allow me to do that. So I'm going to go to my orient, and that one there, I basically want that to be oriented to the world so that as it rotates, it's rotating with the world, not kind of on its own. So I'm going to say, do this to the world, ignore your children, and then hit OK. I get an error saying something has a non-zero rotation. So that means something down this list. So I'm just going to go to freeze transform. That freezes everything, just resets it. Now that should work. Should work. It didn't work. Where are you doing? So let's do this. Let's take this joint, and that joint. We'll unparent it. I'll grab this and then orient it. Nope, still being stupid. I'll grab this one and, I'm sorry, this one and unparent it. And then try it again. There we go. Now it works perfectly. And that is parent all those things back into it. Don't be afraid to do that because you need these joints to be set up good before you move on. It just makes your life a lot easier. These ones will be done using set driven, same way we did the hand on the mech. So I'm just going to grab that. They will not be oriented to the world. They will be just oriented to each other. So I'm just clicking that, hitting apply, clicking that, hitting apply. Maybe this one should be up a little bit more. It does it to all three of them. When this is set up, it's just saying what is the primary one, meaning that as I go into rotate, if I zoom in quick, you can see the X is the one that goes down that chain. Okay, cool, that's good. The spine we do need to be concerned, or the pelvis we need to be concerned about. Make sure this rotates correctly. I have an extra joint in there somehow. Let's just take this and parent it to that one. Take this, parent it to that one. Oops. Oh, there it is. All right, we'll get rid of the extra joint. All right, so let's go to rotation. Let's go to front view. Okay, you can see it's kind of like wonky a little bit. So I'm going to say don't do this to the children. I'll turn on both these off. Maybe that'll fix it. Nope, that still screwed it up. Oh, because I didn't click that. There you go. Perfect. All right, so now that's oriented to the world. Cool. Now I can go to these, and these will not be oriented to the world, but we will click both of those. And all these do is just make sure that as we're rotating stuff, it rotates correctly. Okay, as I rotate his head, it rotates like this and not like some crazy, direction. All right, so that's good. I go through, rename everything. I'm not going to do that here because you don't need to see me do that. I'm going to mirror the joints. Just like I did in the mech one, I would search for left and replace it with right or vice versa. That way it renames them automatically. I don't have those, so I'm just going to go XY, mirror. Double check my orientations again. You can't trust Maya because you don't want to get too far in this and make something not work. All right, let me check these. Rotate. That's good. Okay, just like the mech fingers, as I rotate, I want those to flow nicely. Good. All right, so that's good. I'll double check the neck to make sure. Now this one is pretty forgiving in joint placement, but it's not very forgiving when we get to actually connecting it to the skin. All right, so that's good there. That rotates the correct direction. Awesome. All right, if I needed to manually do any of these, remember I could hit F8. I could turn on my question marks, grab the joint, and just manually rotate it to get it in the exact position. In this case, I don't think I need to do that. Everything looks like maybe it's not good. Let's go to the front view. Oh, it is good. It looked like it was off a second, but it's all good. Cool. All right, so this is the part where we would decide whether we're going with rough or smooth. You can definitely do both and just decide later if you want, but you just have to do them one at a time. So I'm going to go and grab the joints, grab the geometry, not the eye. The eye is a separate thing. He's on his own. He stays there. And then I'm going to go to skin, and I'm going to bind the skin. So like what parenting does is it takes a piece of geometry and connects it to it by basically just moving the whole thing. With this, we have deformation. We have one piece of geometry for the entire body. So with this, I need to go and make sure this is set to joint hierarchy, meaning it's going to do all of the joints. I'm going to set this to dual quaternion, and I think that was all I do. Yes, yes, yes. Oh, bind method is geodesic voxel. These are just ways that it calculates which points get assigned to which joints, and that seems to be a pretty good one. I'll also turn that up to 1024. None of these, this setting won't really affect us much because of the quality of our model, but if you had a higher resolution model, that would definitely go into play. So what it's doing now is it's going to each joint and basically connecting the joints and the vertices to it. So now when I grab any one of these joints and I start rotating it, it should rotate parts of the geometry. Wait for it to calculate. Now this will take longer if we had the other one on there. And this is why we want to make sure that our joints are all set up. Before we get into this stage, if we make a mistake, we need to go back. We have to unbind it, fix the joints, and then reattach it again. And that could take a few minutes, especially if we've done extra work on top of this. One of the struggles you'll always have with rigging is making sure everything moves the way that it should move, meaning that if I have a big circle here around the waist and I grab it and push it down, that I want to make sure that nothing like flies away. There we go. All right, so now he's connected. You can see all the beautiful colors. If I grab these and rotate them, there they go. If I grab these and rotate, there they go. And if I grab the joints down here and rotate, there they go. Okay. Now you'll notice that as I'm rotating this, you'll see that the foot is also kind of moving too, like right there. And that's just part of how this thing is set up. In the video I show how we can tweak it, but basically the way it works is that this joint right here is connected to some of these points. And what happens is some of the points way back here get connected to that joint, and then they just have to be adjusted. Cool. So once I'm satisfied this is all working, I'll take the eye and I'll parent the eye to this joint. And then the reason for that is the eye, if it was skinned, it would actually like squash and deform as its neck rotates. As a parent, it stays as one solid shape. So now I need to test it. I need to go into here, 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 and here. I need to, let's say, rotate this sideways. Make sure the eye still looks like it's there. Rotate it backwards. Make sure the eye still looks like it's there. Good. I'll grab just this joint and rotate it. Oops. Sorry, not that one. This one. That's pretty much the whole head. Rotate. All right, make sure the eye is still there. And again, if I needed to, I would have to tweak some of those divisions. If I grab this one and do it, it's actually doing a pretty good job of keeping that eye locked in. If I needed to, I would shift right click. No, I would just right click. There we go. And go to paint skin weights. And then this is what tells it what joints are connected to what points. So as I move these joints on the neck, if something were to, let's say, affect these, I would want to adjust that. Same thing down here. If I'm adjusting these and the leg is twitching up here, which happens, I would want to adjust that. The way that these work is every single point, so I'm going to switch to my vertices, every single point on this rig is connected to a joint or connected to several joints. And if I go to my General Editors, Component Editor, and Smooth Skins, this one point is being affected by joint 1, joint 15, joint 16, joint 17, and joint 18. Each one of those has a say in what happens to this point. So as I go in here and start grabbing these and rotating them, they're rotating that joint, right? So like something like this, I may not want that to happen. As I rotate this here, maybe I don't want his back to be moving so much. So I'm going to go into this, go into my paint skin weights, and find that joint. So that's joint 15. And actually I'm going to go to joint 1. All of these numbers would add up to 1. So the weight for this point is, let's say, 0.1, and then 0.2, 0.3, 0.4, connected somewhere along these joints. I'm going to basically assign everything for that back to joint 1 right here so that this has less weighting. So I'm going to say add value, I'm going to say 0.05. I'll make my brush bigger. Oops. And then I'm just starting to paint. And it's subtle, but what it's doing is it's taking the weight away from those other areas and making it just affect, these points are only affected by that, okay, is what it's doing. And I'm going to kind of go around this whole thing because I don't want like the side of this being affected too much by that. And his tail feathers also, just some of that. All right, so now when I get into this, I do that, you can see it definitely doesn't affect it as much as it did before. And I can go back and tweak it and adjust it some more, but I think that's pretty good how that's set up right now. One of the struggles that you always get with your rig is making sure that it looks solid, that it looks like an actual character. One of the things that people have is Maya muzzle. This is something that's built into Maya that you can use. The further you get into rigging, the more realistic you want your stuff to look, the more you would get into this kind of setup, where instead of going with joints that we created and skin and then painting those weights, you would actually be creating this kind of thing where you're actually building a bone structure underneath and you're building actual muscles, and then Maya in turn can use those like this to tell it how to flex, how to stretch, how to bend, where solid pieces are. Like on my wrist has a bone right there that doesn't move. If I didn't have that bone, it would be like jelly, and that's what Maya muscle allows you to do. Say this area is rock solid, this area is kind of squishy. These two things work like this. We don't have time to get into all the Maya muscle stuff because it is a pretty complex thing. But this is how they make things look super realistic in movies to get them to move correctly. And when he bends his arm like this, his bicep actually bulges. And then when he stretches his leg out, his muscles are stretching out as well. So it gets into a whole plethora of different things. Cool. So another new thing that we'll be playing with is the, not playing with, but adjusting, is the IK handle. That's good. I'm going to grab this joint. I'm going to grab that joint. One thing you will notice is that when you have this IK handle, you grab it, you can move the leg. That works. You can see there's some spots on the stomach that are definitely not desirable to be moving, so I would have to adjust those by painting the weights. When I grab this and move it down, you'll see that the whole thing is moving down too. For whatever reason, you just have to set a key on it, and then if I move it, it doesn't adjust that. Okay, so you'll see it. Once you start rigging it, you'll get the desired effect. Cool. Another new thing that we'll be playing with is blend shapes. So the way blend shapes work is if we have a shape like so, and then I have some divisions on here, let's say 3 divisions. So I'm going to go to my animation editors, go to blend shapes. No, where are you at? Animation, graph. Oh, shape editor, right, sorry. I'm going to create a blend shape. This is the shape of this, and then I'm going to add a target, okay? So this is like the original shape. This is the target. And basically I do whatever I want to this target, and then Maya will transition or animate between them. So if I were to go like this, like that, go like that, go like that. I'm not adding any divisions, I'm just moving them around. And now with this slider, I can go from one shape to the other shape.
Like a bit from Tron.
Yeah. Okay, now when you get up here to the eye, that's how this works. You're doing a blend shape controlling that little slider that says the eye is open, the eye is closed, the eye is open, the eye is closed. So that will be new. And then the other thing that's going to be new is FX. Nope, wrong menu, wrong menu. FX. This hair thing right here, okay? So you're going to create a curve. And this is just like in the same ones you would use for your other stuff, for your controllers. There we go. And on this curve, you're going to create it and say make selected curve dynamic. And I believe all options are set. Yes, there we go. And now when I hit play, you'll see a slight movement in here. I'm going to go into the attribute editor for it. I'm going to go to my follicle and say only pin the base. And now when I hit play, you'll see that this is actually moving like it's an actual piece of hair or something. By playing with some of these settings in here, how stiff the hair system is, dynamic properties, here we go, stiffness. I'm going to take the compression bend resistance down. There we go. And let's take the stiffness down all over. There we go. So now we're starting to get this more of a hair looking curve. Now what we can do with this is once we have this dynamic curve, we're going to connect it to these tail feathers so that as the character moves and the curves sway from side to side, that those will then move the tail feathers side to side. And then we don't have to worry about manually animating it. Okay, so that's a huge time saver for us. This hair system has been used in movies and stuff. My hair bridge. It's not a bridge. There it is. So like even though this is a bridge and not hair, the way that it's set up and the way that it's controlled is that each one of those pieces of the bridge are being connected using Maya hair. And what that allows you to do is create this very dynamic thing that basically can sway and move back and forth and do all these crazy things. Here's some more stuff that people did with, let's say, Maya hair, that kind of stuff. Okay, and you could even do actual hair with Maya hair and create these kinds of things. It's a bit more setup than we have time for, but it is a cool tool to add to your mix of skills when you're going out in the industry. Cool. And then that's it. Everything else is pretty much the same thing. We're just applying it to this Chickster versus the other one. Your animation for this will be just like before, showing off all the individual controls that you have for it. Done. Oops. I wanted the anim one. There we go. So show off all of the individual controls. You don't need to animate him picking anything up like I have in this example. And I don't know why his eye texture lost it again. Let's reload that. There it is. But you'll see his head turns left and right. His joints are moving here. As he spins around, his feathers on top are moving and the back ones are moving. He wiggles his feet. He picks this thing up eventually. There he goes. And there it is. So just showing off all the controls, do a nice little render. When you do your blink, make sure that your blink looks like a blink. If I hit play, you can see how he's blinking here, and you can see how his eye is moving. Let's do a GoPro camera on him. So new camera. Let's put it right in front of him like this. I'm going to shift click this joint and parent my camera to that joint. So now we have a GoPro as he moves around. You can see it's like locked to him. And this is just so we can see his blinking. Whenever you blink like a real person blinks, whenever you're turning to look left or right, you blink and look that way. And your blink is typically like about 5 frames, 6 frames. It's nothing crazy. If your eyes are open and you're looking left and right, it looks like shifty. It doesn't look like you're actually like blinking because you need to blink. So let me jump back to my regular camera and now watch him as he's blinking. Okay, so you can see how he blinked to look that way, blink to look that way, and then blink to look back. And then you just throw in a couple extra blinks just to give him some more life apart from not having it. It looks very static and like creepy if he never blinks. And just to show that, let's just turn the blinks off. I'm going to mute this attribute so it stays the same thing. So you see you lose all the really big effect of it when he doesn't have that blink on. It still looks like he's stoned or something. Some rigs, you can actually rig the eye itself, where you would actually be able to control the iris open, or the iris pupil opening and closing. You could change color and stuff too on some rigs. This one does not have that. Okay, this will be our last assignment for rigging. Right after this, we're going to get into character animation stuff. So we'll be doing poses and walk cycles and animation. This is our 8th week. This assignment should take about 2 weeks with some overlap of the next assignment. Okay, so if you plan on, I don't have the sheet set up yet, but if you plan on having this by the 20th, that would be a good time marker for it. I would actually say get it done by the 18th so that you can start working on the posing stuff, because I'll go over that on the 18th.